I'd like to call the May 13th, 2019 meeting of the Matthews Board of Commissioners meeting to order. First, we'll start with the safety minute. If we do have to leave the room, we'd go out these back doors. There's a stairwell to the left down the hallway, which will take you to the back parking lot. Or you can go over in the far right corner, which most of you probably came up. You can go down those stairs, it'll take you out to the front of the building. There is a defibrillator out to the right side of the desk. Yeah, we need to close this. The right side of the reception desk. And if we have to call, not that we already have enough police and firemen here, but if we do need to make a call, it'd be 911 from your cell, or if you use a town phone, it would be 911 as well. There's no number to get an outside line on the town telephones. Okay, Mr. Higdon, I'll turn to you for the invocation this evening.
For those who wish to, please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for those that are gathered here and all the residents of our town. Thank you for our ability to be involved in useful work and for the freedom to embrace or reject you. Thank you for loving us even when we disappoint, from your boundless and gracious nature. Lord, this evening I pray for our mayor and this assembled council. I ask that you grant us the ability to work together in harmony even when we have honest disagreements, wisdom during these trying times, and a true sense of welfare of those we represent, and personal peace in our lives as we undertake these tasks. Bless those in our community that put others' welfare above their own, and grant them safe passage back to their homes when their workday is done. Lord, help us find a solution to the senseless shootings that seem to happen in our country now every week, and please keep our citizens, and particularly our students, safe from harm. And finally, Lord, let us work through tonight's agenda in a way that both pleases you and is for the greater good of our beloved town of Matthews. In your holy and blessed name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to take a minute to introduce the folks at the dais this evening. I'll start to my far left. We have Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk. Next to Becky is Jeff Miller. Next to Jeff is Mayor Pro Tem John Higdon. And next to John is Commissioner Chris Melton. Between Mr. Melton and myself is Town Manager Hazen Blodgett. Over to the far right is Maureen Keith, who is our Public Information Officer. Next to Maureen is Jay Camp, our Interim Director for Planning and Zoning. Sitting at the dais is Lori Canapino, who is our Town Clerk. Next to Lori is Barbara DeMint, Commissioner Barbara DeMint. Next to Barbara is Commissioner John Urban, and then Commissioner Chris Query. And sitting to my right is our Town Attorney, Charlie Buckley. And I am Paul Bailey, Mayor of the Town of Matthews. Next item on the agenda is proclamation for National Public Works Week. And ask C.J. O'Neill to come up. There he is.
I'm sorry, guys. Wait, stand by. I jumped the gun on this. I saw proclamation. It was my fault. Trying to get this many cops to move at once is tough.
Someone told them they had donuts.
National Public Works Week is May 19th and 25th, and we have a proclamation this evening to give the CJ and his department. Whereas public works professionals focus on, Public Works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the town of Matthews. And whereas these infrastructure facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public work professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees from state and local governments and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. My mouth is getting dry. Whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the town of Matthews to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their community. And whereas the year 2019 marks the 59th annual National Public Works Week, now therefore I, the Honorable Paul Bailey, Mayor of Matthews, do hereby designate the week of May 19th through the 25th, 2019 as National Public Works Week, and I urge all our people to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies and activities, events, and ceremonies designated to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. In witness whereof, I have unto set my hand and cause the great seal of the town of Matthews, North Carolina, to be affixed this 13th day of May, 2019. Thank you very much.
I actually hadn't planned on anything, but since the police are waiting, I'll be very brief. I don't know how many of you know what Public Works does, but I figure I'd just go ahead and give you an idea. When you wake up in the morning, your alarm clock goes off, the electricity is provided by Public Works. You brush your teeth, the water you use is provided by Public Works. You flush it down, it goes somewhere, we take care of it. You go out on the roads are paved by Public Works. The signals that are out there, the signs, all by Public Works. A lot of the stuff that you see every day that you take for granted, that's what Public Works does. We don't toot our own horn very much, but we're here to help everybody in Matthews. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, CJ.
I promise, this time it's the right time. Yep, just come on up and just stand in front if you would, please. The four representative of the agencies, just stay in the front for us. Yep, all the way around. Fill the front of it. First off, Mayor and Council, thank you guys very much for this opportunity. I think it's important and it's nice to see all the representatives from the county agencies that service Matthews. So I apologize first off for the loud noise outside, but it's nice when a bunch of cops can get together that's not on a critical incident where we get to kind of relive old days and memories and rekindle friendships. So I appreciate this opportunity. Today is the start of National Police Week, and Peace Officer Memorial Day is May 15th. If you don't know, in 1962, President John F. Kennedy announced May 15th of every year to be Peace Officer Memorial Day, where we will honor those who lost their lives in the line of duty and those that were critically injured or disabled. He also declared that any week that May 15th falls in becomes National Police Week. So as you know, May 13th, beginning today through the end of the week, is our National Police Week. So I thought it was nice and a positive environment to bring in all of the county agencies that help service Matthews, which includes the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, the Mecklenburg County ABC. Unfortunately, North Carolina Alcohol Law Enforcement could not be here today, and of course, our friends from the Highway Patrol. So with that, I just appreciate the opportunity to come before you and have this proclamation read. I'm sorry, let me go ahead and identify those that are standing up here if you don't mind. From North Carolina State Highway Patrol, Sergeant Eggers and Trooper Kirkpatrick. From Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff McFadden, Chief Deputy Collins, Major Beebe, Major Johnson, Major Youngblood, Major Magwood, Officer Martinez. From CMPD, we have Deputy Chief Estes and Lieutenant Furr. And from Mecklenburg County ABC Law Enforcement, Sergeant Chesser. From MPD representing those, there's a large number, but from the command staff is Captain Dufresne, Captain Terrell, Captain Sisk, and a whole myriad of other police officers that are out there doing the job every day, so we appreciate you guys coming in today.
I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come out here and be with us this evening. Even though we have a police department here in Matthews that we're very proud of, we all know that it takes all of us together to make this the best county in the state of North Carolina. So thank you for everything that you do every day. I also want to take a moment to recognize a former councilman and a member of our Planning and Zoning Board, Larry Whitley. Larry is a retired highway patrolman as well. So this is the Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day proclamation. Whereas Congress and the President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week, and whereas the members of the law enforcement agencies serving the town of Matthews, including the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, North Carolina Alcohol Law Enforcement, Mecklenburg County Alcohol Beverage Control, and the Town of Matthews Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the Town of Matthews, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibility, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agencies, and that members of our law enforcement agencies recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the law enforcement agencies of Mecklenburg County unceasingly provide a vital public service, and whereas, now therefore, the Matthews Board of Commissioners calls upon all citizens of the town of Matthews and upon all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 13th through the 19th, 2019 as Police Week with appropriate ceremonies and observances in which all of our people may join in commemorating law enforcement officers past and present who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in so doing have established for themselves an inevitable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all systems. And therefore, we do proclaim the week of May 13th through the 19th, 2019 as Police Week and call upon all citizens of Matthews to observe the 15th of May, 2019 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of those law enforcement officers who, through their courageous deeds, have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community or have become disabled in the performance of their duty. And let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. In witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed this 13th day of May 2019. Thank you very much. give everybody a big round of applause. Okay, next I'll turn to the manager for any items to be added to the agenda.
No items to be added to the agenda, Mr. Mayor.
One thing I did want to do is to, hold on a minute. I left my water down here. Thank you. On item 11, 1C on the agenda, the petitioner for this, excuse me, it's 11C1. The petitioner for this is in Stallings at this time, going through the approval of the Stallings piece of that particular zoning action. Therefore, what I'd like to do is ask for a motion to change that to item 14C on the agenda to allow the petitioner to finish the business in Stallings and then be present here in Matthews to go through any changes or concerns that may have been raised in that discussion.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Query. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is public comment, and we have one individual who has signed up, Derek Timmerman. If you would come up to the microphone, please state your name again and your address.
Good evening. My name is Derek Timmerman. I'm with First Baptist Church of Matthews at 185 Trade Street. The reason I wanted to address you all today was just to introduce myself. I've just joined as the executive pastor of First Baptist Matthews, and it's a pleasure to meet you all, and this seemed like an efficient way to do that. I wanted to share also our mission as a church. Our mission as a church is to reach the world for Jesus Christ by making disciples who reach up to God, into the church, and out to the world. And it's that third part of our mission that brings me here tonight, out to the world. I would love to learn from all of you here tonight, and certainly in meetings that continue forward, how we as a church can pray for and serve the community of Matthews in a more constructive way. I'll give the balance of my time back to whoever would like to comment on what all churches, including mine, can do to help serve the town of Matthews. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to recess the public, or the regular meeting for public hearings on applications to amend the Unified Development Ordinance of the town of Matthews. Do you have such a motion? So
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So now the Board of Commissioners is sitting in joint public hearing with, oh, I had turned my mic on. Sorry, better. The Board of Commissioners is sitting in joint public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Board at this time. So we'll go to item 9A, zoning application 2019-697, to change the zoning from R12 to OCD and RBS on that certain property designated as 2026 Matthews Mint Hill Road and belonging to Richard and John Harkey, and being further designated as tax parcel 215-102-01. Mr. Camp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to begin by introducing our planning board. Here on the first row, we have Jana Reeve, Natasha Edwards, Mike Foster, Larry Whitley. On the second row, Scott Query, Jonathan Clayton, and our chair, here's our, actually, this hand. Thank you. Appreciate it. As the mayor mentioned, we have a proposed rezoning this evening for a R12 zoned parcel adjacent to Butler High School. You can see here on the town zoning map the location. The proposal is for a combined RVS and OCD zoning, so this will be a split zoning. The applicant proposes up to 15,000 square feet of office space and up to 22 homes on the property. No flexible design standards are being requested, so these will be the standard setbacks you see listed here below: 30-foot front for office, 20-foot for single family. Not completely to scale, but I thought it would be helpful to put this site into perspective. This is a current aerial photo on Polaris. This is generally the location of the improvements to the site. Note, you'll recall the Bainbridge Apartments were approved about 2 years ago on this site, just up the road. So that's a recent, that's where you see grading underway. Of course, an entrance will be proposed on the Matthews Mint Hill, which is town maintained. And really, this is a 9.3 acre site, but only about half or a little more than half of the property is being developed. The rear of the site will contain the stormwater, water quality facilities, as well as open spaces. There is a creek and I believe a sewer line that bisect the rear portion of the property, so no improvements planned to the rear of the site. Again, just aerial photos showing the proximity, the site, which is again adjacent to Butler High School. The road frontage today is heavily wooded. If you look at the tree survey, and you can see in the photos here, the site's primarily pine trees along the road frontage. I think an important discussion this evening is what direction the applicant should take with regard to tree preservation. Pine trees notoriously don't do well when they've been thinned or deforestation's occurred next to them. We have conveyed to the applicant that across from the Mara ball fields at Fullwood Station, we did have some successful preservation of the pine tree on that site as a buffer to the development. So staff would propose in lieu of, if these trees are removed, that there should be a landscape plan implemented should the site move forward. There are, of course, overhead utilities that do impact the ability to come in with new plantings anywhere within 20 feet of those utilities. I will add that curb gutter and a 10-foot multi-use path would be included on this frontage along Matthews Mint Hill Road. Again, this is a better, actually I'll just skip to the site plan, a better depiction of how the site is proposed to lay out. The two buildings flanking the entrance on Matthews Mint Hill Road are proposed to be office. And as I said earlier, 15,000 feet. The applicant does have the option to do medical office, which of course has a higher parking ratio. So if these did develop as medical, I think you would be seeing probably 25% to maybe a third less office space, so maybe closer to 10,000 feet if this developed out as medical office. The site plan shows 20 houses. The conditional notes specify up to 22 houses. Also note, there's a couple of features of this plan that you might be kind of scratching your head at. One is the slight curvature in the road. That was requested by Public Works as a traffic calming measure. If you make a long straight road, you're just encouraging speeding. So really like that solution. That engineer did make that change. At the end of the road, instead of a traditional cul-de-sac, the traditional cul-de-sac was creating some very odd lot orientations and odd driveway angles. So they are doing a hammerhead turnaround, similar to what's going to be done on Jefferson Street in downtown Matthews, if you're familiar with that. So it'll be a hammerhead turnaround at the end in lieu of a cul-de-sac. The mail kiosk is planned to be in the vicinity of this rear area. These are the proposed elevations. These are illustrative to give you an idea of what the office buildings would look like along Matthews Mint Hill Road, and then, of course, the single-family homes to the bottom here. I think I've hit on most of the proposed conditions here. I did pull, and it's a little bit hard to see at this scale, but this is the list of permitted uses. The applicant has pared down the permitted uses, so it's not everything in the office district, but it does allow for general offices, contractors' offices, medical. I believe they've also got salons in there, but I'm not sure. Yeah, medical, dental, optical offices. So this site comes in, we've got an 8% tree save and a 15% for office. This site is clocking at 24%. Again, you've got the natural area to the back of the site, which does play a fairly large role in that, the larger tree save than we've seen in a lot of contemporary developments that have come in recently. Just to get a little bit into the nuts and bolts of the land use plan, we don't have a specific recommendation here. It is what I would call transitional. The property is bounded by a single-family neighborhood and a public school, but then across the street you've got office condos and single-family homes and patio homes. We feel that the site is consistent with the area. The property has been for sale for numerous years. We've had probably at this point dozens of meetings with prospective buyers, everything from 100 townhomes to 200 apartments. I mean, we have listened to many, many proposals, and this was really the first proposal that we've seen come in that was appropriate for the site from a planning perspective. And I will say that it was staff's recommendation to do a mixed-use site here with the office on the frontage. We felt that that created a better streetscape from the public's perspective than the sides of single-family homes up against Matthews Mint Hill Road. And here I've just copied the RVS zoning requirements for reference. Not a lot of outstanding issues here. We typically see a little bit more detail in architectural notes. I've explained that to the applicant, so they're aware of that we need a little bit more clarification on what architectural items and features would be included with each home. Again, I mentioned the tree save. The only public works outstanding I had was that they'd like to see the sidewalk on the new proposed public street be extended back into the common open space for access. We did receive the school report just in time. We received it this afternoon, so I did want to read those numbers out for you. Bain, so we'd see a total of 13 new students as a result of this development. Bain Elementary in Mint Hill would have an increase of 6 students, and that would put occupancy at the school at capacity rather at 123%. There is a note that there's a relief elementary school planned that would begin construction in 2021 that would relieve Bain, Piney Grove, and I think a third school, I can't recall. So there would be relief coming to that capacity number. Mint Hill Middle would add 3 students and be at 128% capacity. And finally, Butler would increase by 4 students and would be at 110% capacity. So that's just a real brief look at what we're looking at from a school's perspective.
Okay.
Having said that, that's the staff report.
Any questions for Mr. Camp? Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. Jay, the CMS report, it gives the impact of this development in a vacuum.
Correct.
Can we see numbers? Can we request numbers from staff or from CMS that shows what we've approved, whether it be the Prophet Dixon project, the Bainbridge project? What are we really at holistically outside of the vacuum? I mean, this doesn't do us any good of what we've already approved and what the real impact is in the year.
Sure. We've been tracking since, going back to 2014, we're tracking approvals both by rezoning and by right, and we're tracking the school impact for every new development. So I'd be happy to send that information to the board.
As of this report, Mint Hill Middle, just as a result of this project, would be at 128%. I can't think that we're not in the 150% with all the other projects in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Urban?
Jay, the biggest piece of this whole thing is the RVS.
Mm-hmm.
And you clearly put it in your statement to the developer, you know, how do you meet that intent? How, looking at this, how does staff even remotely begin to look at it meeting the RVS intent?
Yeah, and the reason we included that intent statement there was that district was created with the express purpose of providing different or unique styles of single-family housing, whether it's attached or detached. Traditionally, as we've done RVS zonings over the years, you all recall, the applicants have included either design features in the site plan or architectural features on the homes to meet that intent statement. But we do like to hold folks accountable to make sure this is not just an excuse to zone to a higher density to get more homes on the property, and we want it to meet the intent statements as close as possible. So that's been the charge that I've levied to the applicant, that they really need to look at the single-family architecture and explore, does it meet that intent? I think it needs some work from our perspective. In one way, we like the multi-use as an aspect of that, because you're providing potential jobs, if not services, that you can walk to from your house, which I think is excellent. It's making this more of a mixed-use environment. So it's not just architecture, it's placement of uses in the area.
So in your comment, though, it says staff recommended the site be developed with a mix of office and residential development. You're saying that in the big scale sense. You're not talking about this particular project. You're saying, hey, we think that a mix of office and residential development would be good for this location.
Yes.
But the fact that this doesn't even support any, at this stage in the game, any RVS intent, you're not recommending this particular project. I just want to be very clear that you're talking about staff in the big picture is saying this could be a location for this, but as far as this particular project goes, you're not saying we recommend it.
I guess let me go back to the site plan
It makes
here.
it sound like with a few. It makes it sound like you're saying with a few tweaks you'd be okay with it, and I'm not sure that's what you're saying.
Yeah, with a few tweaks, I think this is a great start for this project. If you look at the site from a connectivity aspect, there's no place for connectivity. The site's hemmed in. There's no place for stub streets. Everything's developed out around it. From a traffic perspective, we've got almost 1,000 units of multifamily housing under construction. We like the single family adjacent to single family. I think the one piece that's lacking and needs some tweaking is probably the architecture to get it closer to meeting the intent of that RVS district.
So one follow-up question. Then playing this one more step, why wouldn't this site be more conducive to the cottage zoning or the cottage infills that we've been talking about?
It certainly could be. I mean, there's not a single answer for what could be built here.
Okay.
That would certainly be an option.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first is, what type of fencing would separate Butler High School from these homes? Do we have any detail as to the type of fencing? I tried to blow up the scale and I couldn't read it.
I think there's currently, I was talking to the mayor, there's a chain link fence out there that Butler has installed. There's, as of today, there's no plan to install fencing. Single family development's not required to screen or place fencing adjacent to an institutional use like a high school.
So there's existing 6-foot chain link?
It's 4 or 6. I
I
can't
think it's
recall.
closer to 4, but
Yeah.
My concern is security
Okay.
and people walking back and forth. That can be ironed out. The second question is, I like the curve in the road for the reasons stated. Will the homes have staggered setbacks so that you're not looking at a straight line of front porches?
There is a little bit stagger just as a result of the curvature of the road.
Aside from that, though, I would suggest or ask that they
Okay.
somehow stagger a couple feet to reduce monotony.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay. Any other questions for Jay? Does anyone on the Planning and Zoning Board have questions for Mr. Camp? Okay. So I guess the next step is a petitioner.
They are.
Or applicant
Yes,
present.
sir. Go ahead, come up, Wayne. This pointer. Let me get you a laser pointer that works. You can use the mouse. I've got a pointer here if you'd like. Red button right there.
Thank you, Jay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Wayne Harris with Harris Engineering, and I'm here representing the applicant, Sennacory Builders. Ed Estridge with Sennacory is here, as is Randy Smith. Randy is with Landmark Development Properties. who is sort of the consultant with respect to the office zoning. I think Jay's done an excellent job of giving you the overview of what's going on. This is a somewhat unique site. On one hand, it's kind of the hole in the donut. It's what's left over. To the south and to the east is Butler High School property, with fronts on Matthews Mint Hill Road, Old 51, of course. And the property to the north is fully developed, so the only means of ingress egress to the site is coming off of Matthews Mint Hill Road. There's not any other opportunity for connectivity. The rear, roughly 40% of the site, has some topo issues, some wetland issues, swim buffer issues. We were trying to figure out how to develop this property. And at the risk of throwing Jay under the bus, when we met to talk about scenarios for single-family development, it was actually planning staff that said, have you thought about looking at office on the frontage? And to be honest, we hadn't. The front, roughly half of the site, it's a 9.4 acre site. The front half of the site is in the highway overlay district, which has, as you well know, a number of different uses. But Jay suggested, again, apologies, Jay. Jay suggested considering office or office condo type uses on the frontage, because then that becomes more of a buffer and a separation for this transition. Because part of what we were struggling with is if you did this as single family, because that's how it's zoned, it's what it's adjacent to, how do you treat those lots that would be having their side exposure onto Matthews Mint Hill Road? Using the office type use gives us sort of a natural separation. It's consistent with the land use across the street, which while their access isn't off of Matthews Mint Hill Road, it is various types of office use. So it gives us a way that we make this transition from high school institutional to a less intense use to single family as they're approaching the 51 intersection. And then utilizing the portion of the site to rear that as the residential. So we felt like that the RVS gave us a sort of a slot within the ordinance that gave flexibility to make this work. Dimensionally, again, the site it's long and skinny, so you only really have enough room to put a street roughly down the center of the site. At Public Works, or the town engineer's request, we have provided some curvature to break that up, and so it's not just a monotonous straight street. So that's sort of the 525-word version. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Urban?
Yeah, I mean, I've got several of them, and I see staff's point about the office. However, thinking about how important that flyover is going to be and the whole redevelopment of that intersection is going to take place, I would think that the concentration of office and mixed and use and retail would be there, where Piccadilly's is currently, where the gas station currently is, and things like that, and along Moore Road. This is kind of a leap of faith beyond the school. And normally I would, support a project like this, but frankly, I'm torn on this one to the point where you're not knocking my socks off. I mean, I've got office elevations that are very plain Jane. I've got house elevations that are very plain Jane. I asked about the cottage concept. Was you have an opportunity here of doing a very heavily buffered entry to a cottage environment that gets you the density you're looking for, makes for a nice transition for the larger single family, but allows to work with the natural contours of the site, is a little bit more creative. It pushes more of the RVS. This is frankly, we're going to put houses on both sides of the street, we're going to put a bend in the curve, call it RVS, and go home. And there's a gentleman sitting up here, he's now the mayor, and I know 8 years ago he would have said the same thing. He says, you're not knocking my socks off. So if we want to take this as the first brushstroke, that's fine, but I'm not convinced at this stage at the high level. And if you want to get into details, I can get into details, but we'll see what else everybody else says. Thank you.
Mr. Higdon?
Just to follow up, maybe a disagreement with Commissioner Urban. given the fact that our schools are so overwhelmingly overpopulated, I would not be in favor of putting higher density cottage type housing here simply because we have no room for the children that it would generate in the school. So I would prefer to see single family. I think it also fits in the environment of the surrounding neighborhoods as well. Just another commissioner's opinion. Doesn't knock my socks off, but it's not too bad.
Mr. Query.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say is, over the years, we have pretty much said that we wouldn't let commercial go any further out 51 than where it is now. And we have a site just up the road from there that has gone to houses which have been tried to be turned into offices, and we completely denied it over and over again. So again, what Commissioner said is that I have a concern when you move past the school and you're starting to put offices in there. I would prefer residential in that area too.
You're not knocking my socks off. I think we need to step back and look at what's going to happen in this area once Highway 74 gets completed up to 485. This board has set aside $5.2 million to ensure that we have wide walking, biking paths on the bridges over Highway 74 once that interstate is complete, so that we're connecting the two sides of town. In this particular case, the path will go down into that area, but it will allow people to walk or bike into the downtown. Correct. And get over to the Sportsplex as well. So I think we have to look at what we're trying to achieve relative to connectivity with the downtown. And I don't know that this really does that. The second thing is that the offices in the front, your picture that you had dormers on the top of the roof. You need to, if you want to continue forward with this and this kind of look, I think you need to improve your drawings to really let us know what it is that you're going to be placing at that location. And the same thing with the house designs. I mean, I can't even remember how many petitions we've had that have come up here. These look like the same houses. You all look like you're cutting them out of the same magazine or something. But you know, it's the step up to the front load garage, one window. It just really, it's kind of getting a little bit boring to me. And then on the street, you got the curve in there, but frankly, if you want to maybe move that, okay. I can see in 4 or 5 years, the front 8 houses coming into this council upset because some kid's got a Chevelle at the end of the street, and he's zooming up the street, and that little squiggle is not going to stop him. So I think you have to think about some speed humps in there, because I don't want to spend taxpayer money doing that. But we have examples over and over again of neighborhoods in this community where they're closed off. It's just the people that live in the neighborhood. And we've had to go back in and put speed bumps in because the people that actually live there are speeding through the neighborhood. So to me, that's just something you need to think about up front and get that addressed. Now, what are you going to do about the parking behind the offices and the potential of parents coming in, dropping kids off to avoid the line at Butler High School, kids coming in their cars and parking there to go to school, and other myriad of things that they'll think up? I mean, how are you going to control that?
Let me respond to that comment. when we had the community meeting, I'm not sure if we have any of the neighbors here that were at the community meeting. Ah, we do. That was actually a comment they brought up, that there was a concern. I think we had, I know we had 4 property owners represented. One of those was across the street from the site, one of the commercial owners. The other 3 were residents of Kenway Drive. They have had issues over the years with students parking in driveways, on the street, whatever. So the heads up was, hey, if you don't police this and enforce it, it's going to be an issue. So I'm not sure how to tell you that we can prohibit that from happening, but going in, we're aware that that could be an issue that we would have to, that the property owner would have to address from day one.
Well, I would ask you to address it up front, because where it's going to get left is in our lap, and our police department's going to be.
Oh, it's certainly the petitioner's intent to address it. I'm just saying I can't stop it from happening, but they'll have to be aware that you got to, that this could happen, and if it does, you're going to have to tow cars, you're going to have to police the parking lot, you're going to have to do whatever to nip it in the bud.
Yep. Okay, Ms. DeMint?
Yeah, I want to echo Commissioner Urban's idea about cottages or something of that nature. If you focus on cottages or even a small 55-plus targeted community, you're not going to affect our schools. And I don't believe you would have some of the concerns that you would have with just purely single-family homes. So that would just be a suggestion to look into.
Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. Right now, I can't support the offices up front. I know this was not necessarily your idea, but I think later on down the road in 10 years, if those 20 homeowners were here and that neighborhood were built, we'd have a room packed full of people protesting against the development of those offices in the front of their neighborhood. I agree with the mayor. He brought up the point of what we see on this drawing. Granted, it's illustrative in nature, but those 2 office buildings shows the dormers. The detail we've been provided does not. But as it stands now, if I were to choose up or down on this, it would be down very easily. The houses, it's been said already, the houses look like they've been copy and pasted from every other petition that's come before us in the past several years. The offices, the elevations of the offices don't complement the elevations of the homes, and I would think that you would want one smooth transition as you go from the office buildings into the neighborhood, so that when you pull in, you may not notice, hey, I'm leaving from an office park into a neighborhood. I'm not going to use the phrase that this doesn't knock my socks off, but this is more of a, if I had to take it or leave it, I'd leave it. And I hate to be rude, but I'm a no on this right now.
Okay. Mr. Higgin?
Yeah, just to comment, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other about the office space. However, if that is discounted, perhaps you could consider a shared driveway and side load garages where the front of the homes could face Matthews Mint Hill instead of the sides of a house. I am in favor of some additional single-family houses in Matthews. I don't think everything we need to build's got to be an apartment or a townhome or a cottage house. I think we still need to build this product. And I would be in favor of single-family homes, but that may be something you want to consider. As I do agree that having the side of a home facing Matthews Mint Hill would not be very attractive.
Mr. Urban?
I mean, you have an opportunity here, and to go to Commissioner Higgins' point about the single family, I don't think we have an abundance of cottages, if any cottages actually built in Matthews, but what I see here are 22 homes, and correct me if I'm wrong, my guess is price point between $350 and $450 or higher. What I would rather see is smaller homes. You know, the 55 plus is an excellent conversation if you want to take the school out of the equation, but I would rather see more houses that are affordable. I'm not going to say affordable houses because it'll suck the air out of the room, but more houses that are affordable to help with the diversification of housing quality stock we have in Matthews than anything else. So that would be my point, is to move into a cottage type product you'd get the square footages down, you could rise that number up again. If it was an adult restricted type situation, takes the school out of it. But we're in desperate need. Townhomes are at 250 plus. It would really be nice to have some single family home product that was in that 250 range for a small family. When are we going to start? I guess that's my question, is when are we going to start doing that? And here you have an opportunity, because if it was single family with families, the schools, you walk to it. The children can walk to the stores, so can the families. It takes the cars off the road, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this could be vetted in a much larger conversation about that whole intersection.
Any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from the Planning and Zoning Board? Okay. All right, we will ask for public input, and then you will have an opportunity after that to address any issues that may surface during those comments. So is there anyone present who would like to speak in support or opposition to zoning application 2019-697? Please come up to the podium, state your name and your address for the record.
I'm Gary Mullis, been in the wonderful town of Matthews since the 60s, early 60s I might say, and I'm at 1916 Kimway Drive, which would be right behind the retention pond that's not being focused on right now. That's a concern. How many complaints, council, commissioners, will you have when we have health issues due to retention ponds? How many do we have across the street that are in bad shape right now? And how many is coming in the planned apartment use that we're having on the old Overcash property? Those are questions that, as a citizen, I wonder about, because I already see them failing across the street. So it's probably the owner's responsibility, but who gets the complaints? I don't even know who the owners are, so you do. Okay? So fair enough, I want these gentlemen to do good business. I want Richie and Johnny to sell their property, but I want it to be done in a way that appreciates what's in Matthews. One of the things, I told the people that are proposing this, I really need to see what kind of houses you're doing. Not just this is close, which is what they represented to us at the discussion. I think you need the same thing. The concern I have is, what do you do? Two things. The noise from the school. I love children. I got 7 grandchildren. They're from college to 13 years old. The middle school, you were talking about the overabundance of people. We have them. We have them. It's awful to get into that. But let me tell you, do any of y'all know anybody that lives where the school is now? Beside Butler? Do you know anybody that lives on Kimway Drive? Yeah? Okay, so you add an hour to your day if you're there when school comes in or school lets out. And now we're going to put more people into the situation with those offices. I don't understand that. It's zoned for single family. I want these guys to have their project. I want it to succeed, but the zoning probably ought to remain at single family is where I'm coming from. And the impact's going to be worse when we get the redevelopment of Highway 74. We got to think about the future of our town. Do we really want something that's going to cut us off and separate us into an A and a B? I know the state's driving it. I understand that. We can't hardly do anything about it. But let's not add to the confusion. So I think as it's presented and the facts that we have, as you said, several of you, I counted about 6, we don't have enough information to say, is this good for this town? And I'm the property owner. I'm concerned about my property value. Let's be honest. Wouldn't you be? If somebody new's coming in and they're changing everything, you'd be concerned. Now, these gentlemen proposed, as one of y'all said, probably 320 and up. By the way, I'm a builder. I have to make a living that way too. But 320 and up would pretty much be fitting the zone. I'm saying that because we mentioned the cottages. Don't have a problem with cottages. Worked a lot of places in Dilworth. Put those kind in. Where they're 320 and up, I won't have any problem. But don't take it to a lesser quality than we already have. That would be a mistake. You would be injuring people that are already here and have been in Matthews for a long time. We can't forget that while we're doing our planning. So I appreciate your time. I want you to reconsider it. I want these guys to get their development, but I want it to be better.
Thank you.
I'm John Smith, and I live at 1900 Kimway Drive. One of the questions you asked about the fence, that's a 6-foot fence around the school. On the right-hand side of this project, that ground level will be cut down 10 or 12 feet, and that dirt moved over for the second row of houses. So it'll be sort of buffered from the school already with about a 12-foot bank. As far as I'm concerned, the thing that I'm concerned about is trying to devalue the houses put in there, and we know what's going to happen. Maybe not the first couple of years, but then it'll start moving in just anybody. I'm a little bit ticked that the state has took 2 houses at the end of my street and put troubled children in it. Ain't bothered me other than you see them walking it down the street all the time, but that don't make me happy because they're not a part of Kimway. They're just there till they can get shipped somewhere else. But I have no problem with single family in there, but to bring it down to the apartment idea or cottages that would eventually bring the value of the property down, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in support or opposition to the application? Okay. We'll turn to the applicant. Do you have any further comments?
Applicant would like to request the board to continue the public hearing to give them time to address the concerns raised this evening.
Okay, and the reason for that is because of the planning and zoning board meeting or being shifted, or?
It is. There is a time crunch. I mean, planning board meets next Tuesday, and with the number of concerns that were raised, I think the applicant would be hard pressed to address many of these concerns in 6 or 7 days.
Okay. So the applicant has made a request to continue this public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion we continue the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So we can continue discussion here. It's just that the public hearing remains open until our meeting a month.
Correct.
Next planning and zoning.
Put a date certain on that continuance.
Yes, June, is it the 10th?
June the 10th.
I need to revise my motion to make it June
June
10th.
10th.
Correct.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Miller?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
With respect to Mr. Mullis's comments, the BMP, he referred to it as, I think, the detention or retention pond. It's actually to BMP, or best management practice. So it actually is serving as both water quality and stormwater detention. It's on the opposite side of our site from the rear of Mr. Mullis's property and a number of feet higher than his site. It will be designed in accordance with both state and Mecklenburg County requirements, It is not an option. It is a requirement of all development, as I'm sure the board is aware. And it is not a wet pond. It is, it'll be designed as a sand filter. So it is wet after rain. It will drain within a matter of time. But it's designed to both perform a detention function temporarily, but also to clean that water and meet the water quality standards. He mentioned the elevations, and just for clarity, the elevations that was presented as part of the submittal package and the board has seen are the same elevations that we used at the community meeting. So there wasn't any sleight of hand. It wasn't that we showed something to the neighbors and something different here. And we will take the board's comments, and I'll meet with our client, the petitioner, and take all that under consideration.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So in this particular case, the public hearing is continued. This application will not go to the Planning and Zoning Board until after the June 10th meeting, at which time the petitioner would assumably come back and there will be additional information regarding the petition. And then if at that time the public hearing ends, then it would go to the Planning and Zoning Board at that time for review. Okay? All right, the next item is 9B, motion 2019-2. This is to change the zoning on 3 parcels as follows. Number 1, to change the zoning from I-1 to R-12 on that certain parcel designated as 433 East John Street and being further designated as tax parcel 215-014-06. Number 2, to change the zoning from BH to R-15 on that certain parcel designated as 1364 Matthews Mint Hill Road and being further designated as tax parcel 215-081-07. And number 3, to change the zoning from BH to R-15 on that certain parcel designated as 11210 Brigman Road and being further designated as tax parcel 215-081-29. Mr. Camp.
All right, and just for the audience, I wanted to make a clarification. When you see a zoning motion up here, these 3 sites, the proposed rezoning is being led by the town, so there's not an applicant seeking this rezoning action by the town of Matthews. You see here the memo before us. In 2018, the town began looking at the direction of the board, zonings throughout, we've got 17 square miles, numerous properties. I don't know what our total property count is or parcel count, but the board asked us to look at properties or parcels within the town that we may need to relook at the zoning and ensure that the zoning on those parcels is appropriate now and in the future as we're looking at significant changes going on in the community. In 2019, back in February at the town's planning conference, we did present a significantly pared down list of parcels for the board to review. Still probably several dozen parcels in that. Given the magnitude of bringing in all of those at once, we thought that it would be better to focus on several parcels at a time, given the complexities of some of these sites. So as the mayor mentioned, we've got 3 sites. 2 are located in the future E&T district, 1 along East John Street. I will, Maureen, I'm sorry, can you pass me the mouse there? Thank you. We'll start with the property on East John Street. Many of you are probably aware of this site as you're entering Matthews westbound on John Street just before you get to the post office. This is the warehouse located at the corner of Charles Buckley Way and East John Street. Is currently zoned I-1. I'll get to the zoning map in just a moment. And the site's about 2.5 acres. It's 2.4, 2.5 acres and about 45,000 square feet of warehouse space according to tax record. You will see if you've read your agenda package, we do have a letter from an attorney, Mr. John Cook, representing the applicant, requesting that the board withdraw this zoning motion for this property. They have several concerns that are laid out in the letter. I will state, from staff's perspective, we have had several conversations with representatives of the property owner. There is some interest in potentially moving the truck docks off John Street, which would obviously reduce the traffic backups that we realize once the trucks are making their turning movements in. The applicant, we have had some discussions about an I-1 CD zoning here. We feel like that would provide some future safeguards to future redevelopment of the site. As it stands, a straight I-1 zoning in this location would allow for anything from a McDonald's to a car wash to a gas station, or many, many other uses in I-1. So as it stands, this warehouse has been here for decades and decades. Everyone's used to it. Staff's concern is the future ramifications as development continues to heat up and sites become more scarce. We're really concerned about how the site could redevelop in the future. Staff would be supportive of an I-1 CD with limited uses to maintain those uses as a warehouse. But that obviously would need the support of the property owner to do a conditional zoning. So I know that was sort of a mouthful. I just want to get those items out. And of course, the attorney's letter is included here. Moving on, 11210 Brigman Road. This is the AMF Caroline Lane site. It's a BH zone property with about 71,000 square feet of building area. Again, this is a transitional zone along Matthews Mint Hill where we have significant changes. This is the gateway to the E&T district. Obviously, the town cannot zone to E&T. It's a conditional district, but staff is proposing a R15, which is well, there's R15 zoning contiguous to the site located to the back of the property. So that's the nearest residential zoning. Finally, 1364 Matthews Mint Hill Road. This is a vacant parcel. It's located adjacent to the recently constructed Woodspring Suites. The site, being BH, could support multiple future uses, fast food restaurants, auto sales, auto repair, hotels, lodging, so on and so forth. Ultimately, I think this site makes sense as E&T, and we've had some discussions with the attorney, Mr. Henderson, that represents the current owners. As a staff-led and initiated zoning, of course, once again, we cannot zone to conditional districts, so we have recommended the residential R15 zoning. For each of these sites, just going to review the zoning map here. Again, this is the warehouse at 433 East John Street. You can see it's surrounded on 3 sides by residential zoning. There's a church with RI zoning just adjacent to it here. This is Charles Street to the back, of course the railroad tracks, and this is John Street along the frontage. And just stop me if you have any questions as I scroll through these. 11210 Brigman Road. This is the 9-acre parcel we're referencing. We do have some E&T zoning adjacent to it. That is the apartment community and mixed-use development under construction. The balance of the site, R15, located to the back and side of the site, is zoned residential. This outline here is a sports parkway, if that helps you familiarize yourself with the site. And finally, 1364 Matthews Mint Hill. This is the corner lot here along Brigman and Matthews Mint Hill. Of course, the flyover of Matthews Mint Hill over 74 will begin generally in this area. When the Woodspring Suites was developed, that was built with a shared driveway, so driveway access to whatever gets built to the site would use the driveway that was put in place for the Woodspring Suites. Essentially, that's the zoning map. So I'll be happy to answer any questions the board has of staff at this time.
Mr. Higdon.
Other than the Stronghaven site, have you had any correspondence or communication with the owners of the other 2 parcels?
Yes, we have with that Stronghaven site and with Mr. Bob Henderson, the attorney for the Brigman family who owns this vacant parcel.
Mr. Miller?
Staying on the Brigman Road, I'm confused a little bit by the bowling alley rezoning, the AMF. No matter what it's zoned today, isn't a bowling alley fit with an entertainment district where there's going to be athletes and kids and families? It seems appropriate, even if it's zoned something else, the use seems appropriate, so I'm confused.
We're primarily looking at future use and potential redevelopment of the site that would not in keeping with the vision that we've laid out for 20 years now for this entertainment district. So that's staff's primary concern.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Urban.
Jay, let's go back. It's hard to talk about 3 separate properties and 3 different conditions, but let's talk about the East John one.
Okay.
The original intent was to move it to an R12, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Just for the record, I was asked by a citizen jogging by the other day, and they got a little testy, rightfully so. They thought that we were downzoning it to R12 to put up apartments. I do not believe apartments sit in the R12. Is that correct?
Yeah, the 12 stands for a 12,000 square foot minimum lot size for a single family dwelling.
Okay. So for the record, I'm sure that person will come back to me at some point. I don't know if they're in the room or not, but they were getting irate, and I calmed them down to the point that R12 is our sort of traditional placeholder for downzoning a property or keeping it in limbo for future use. So, okay, that being said, and maybe this question goes to Charlie, I could see the I-1CD, because it sounds like it has to be a mutual agreement between us and the owner, correct?
We would need the signature of the property owner to proceed with that.
But I would, and Charlie may just lambast me here in a second, but in my opinion, though, I would want to see the truck access enacted upon almost immediately. I'd want to see a time frame in which that gets changed, because frankly, if there's anything that does disruption to this community, it's the truck traffic that locks down that street. The pollution from all those cars idling and sitting there. So I'd want to see that happen. I'd want to see the site cleaned up, because it's fairly undesirable in the context of the rest of the neighborhood. And I'd like to see some effort on a landscaping plan if indeed we went to the I-1CD. So those would be sort of my first brushstrokes, because it really is not conducive to the element that we need downtown, but I'm willing to work and find a compromise provided things took place right away. Because I'm really tired. I'm sure all these board members get the phone calls or have stopped in that traffic. The parking lot is all broken up. The building's in disrepair. If I'm not mistaken, someone can confirm with me, they had an incident in which they had to shut down the facility because the forklift hit a column. So it tells me the building's, so anyway, I think we'd have to work to make to see his way towards the I-1CD, but I'm willing to have that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. On Strong Haven, East John, same thing. They say they're willing to work with planning staff, and they want to keep the current use in conformance. Same as Commissioner Urban. Is it willing to utilize Charles Street or Buckley Way for trucks backing into their loading docks? If it's not, no sympathy here. They say their site has been enhancing the general prospects of the town, yet when I drive by, I see graffiti, I see rusty metal buildings, and a poorly addressed site, honestly. So I question how they're enhancing the general prospects of the town, but if they're willing to utilize Charles Street or Buckley Way for trucks, and some of the other points that Commissioner Urban pointed out, landscaping, et cetera, and clean up the property, I see no problem with going to a I-1CD.
I'll respond to that, Mr. Miller. I don't see that trucks coming out of that property on the Buckley Way or Charles Street really does anything differently other than from a traffic perspective. You're still taking the trucks into residential areas, and it's just not a condition that I think is appropriate that close to downtown. But Mr. Higgin.
I'll just, I guess, echo some of the comments by other commissioners and the mayor. you know, it may have been appropriate to back a truck up on a major thoroughfare in 1960, but in 2019, you can't do that. And, you know, traffic's backing up all the way to Monroe, waiting for trucks to pull in there, it seems like. So that's totally unacceptable. That needs to be addressed if we're going to work with them for any kind of compromise. That has to be addressed. I hear about that, and I work at Combraco, downtown Matthews, and I hear somebody complain about those trucks at least once a week, every week, for years. So I would love to have that issue addressed as soon as possible.
Mr. Query.
Yes, I'd like to kind of join in with the rest of them, but as far as the staying in industrial zoning in any form or fashion, I think would be wrong. It's circled by residents, and I think it should be a residential site zoned anyhow. And I don't think any kind of an industry going in there in that area and on that road would be satisfactory.
Mr. Urban.
Okay, so since we're using this as the public hearing opportunity, getting it out there, let's talk about what I see are the two most closely related properties. We mentioned that the bowling alley would become a legal non-conforming use, which freaks everybody out. Like, how could that be? But anyway, I do support staff's recommendation at this stage because this town, and it's been public record and public discussion for 20-plus years about the nature of this particular location, the site, the A&T, the vision, and we have sort of seen what has happened when certain properties have not been under that vision. We've gotten taken off guard, and there have been incidences. So I would say at this stage in the game, unless we're going to be sitting down, well, let me back up a second. Have you heard from the bowling alley at all?
I've not.
Okay. But they've been fully contacted, correct?
Yes.
Because it's always interesting. I always get the letters and emails. I've never been informed, blah, blah, blah. So basically, it's the one loan parcel that we're 1364 that's Bob represents from that aspect of it. So at least from my standpoint, one of seven, I continue to have further discussions about it, but I do support the way staff is trying to embrace the entire area under the E&T. Is there a compromise in there? Just like the John Street one, to talk to that property owner about something? Sure, but tell me what that compromise is. It's not a compromise, well, we'll build it and don't worry about it. That's not going to happen. So that's my 2 cents on those two parcels.
Any other? Mr. Query.
Yeah, since John started down the other thing, those two parcels to me have can have a big impact on our whole E&T district. And until we had the extended stay built right beside it, it didn't really set with me that we thought that's what would be a right kind of place there. And talking to our police officers, I think they've had 200-plus calls there, and that place has only been in business maybe a year or two. That is not what I would want in the town or near the town or near the entertainment district. So I agree with what we're asking for now.
Okay. No questions from the board. Does the Planning and Zoning Board have any questions for Mr. Camp? Okay. All right. So, is there anyone? Yeah. Is there anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition to motion 2019-2? If so, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Robert E. Henderson, 831 East Moorhead Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. Earlier this evening, I handed to your town clerk a letter, which is now being passed out to you. Don't worry about trying to read that as I'm up here, because I'm going to read it to you. So here's my communication to you. I represent the Brigman family, owners of the real property, which I refer to as the property in this letter, also known as 11210 Brigman Road. This property is the subject of the above referenced motion in this letter, which seeks a downzoning from BH Highway Business to R15 Residential. The property has been zoned business for as long as the town has records. There is no adopted or proposed Matthews land use plan that recommends the rezoning of this property to residential. There are no changes in conditions to support the zoning at this location as a single-family district. The rezoning does not support a legitimate public interest such as protecting existing adjacent residential areas. Finally, it would be practically impossible to develop this property under the R12 single-family standards of the Matthews UDO. The town of Matthews adopted a land use plan some years ago specifically targeting this property and calling for an entertainment district with intense and diverse land uses, urban design principles, including such features as shared parking decks. A large multifamily project near the property, petition 2017-664, the Prophet Dixon project, was approved as the first part of the planned ENT district and is now under active development. All of this completely contrary to the proposed downzoning from both a legal and a land planning perspective. I have previously suggested, and I now formally tender, the Brigmans' offer to cooperate in the early designation of their property to the ENT district as set forth in the UDO at section 155.503B8, subsection D. This designation requires very little specificity under the ordinance, and I suggest the following motion for adoption. Resolved that the Board of Commissioners of the Town of Matthews, with the consent of the property owner, shall designate parcel 213-08129 for early designation pursuant to section 155.5038D of the UDO. The property owner will develop the property with only land uses permitted in the ENT district. 2, the structures, themes, landscaping, and bicycle facilities created in the development of the subject property will be generally consistent with those approved in petition 217-664, the Prophet Dixon petition. Minimum and maximum build-out of the development will be subject to the limitations set forth in the ENT district. 4, a site plan and/or elevation plan will be reviewed and approved by the Board of Commissioners prior to any land disturbing activity. I hope you will engage your very able legal counsel and planning staff as necessary to move this proposal forward as a motion of the Board of Commissioners issued with the consent of the property owner. Adopting such a motion and approving the early designation will create land regulations entirely consistent with the existing plans for the area and providing all appropriate protections against any contrary land development. If the town should approve the proposed R12 single-family downzoning, the Brigmans will be forced by law to appeal that decision within 60 days. For the town to force such a legal contest makes no sense for anyone, especially in light of the Brigmans' willingness to consent to the ENT district early designation as proposed. I sincerely hope you will table the current downzoning motion and instead move forward with the motion for early designation, thereby accomplishing the goals already established by the town and avoiding an unnecessary and unfortunate result. Thank you for your consideration of this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
My name is Philip Runkle. I'm with the law firm of Womble Bond Dickinson, 301 South College Street, Charlotte. Mayor Bailey, members of the Board of Commissioners, and the members of the Planning Board, again, I'm Phil Runkle with Womble Bond Dickinson. I'm here tonight on behalf of Stronghaven. Also with me tonight is Roger Loney. He is the Vice President of Process Improvement for Stronghaven. We understand that this downzoning petition was initiated at the request of the board. And as was stated earlier, we have a letter from my colleague John Cook dated May 7th of this year where we requested that the board stop this rezoning now and withdraw this downzoning of our client's property. We are more than willing to work and have discussions with the town and certainly on all of the issues that were raised tonight by the board and other issues that may be raised. That is certainly a discussion that Stronghaven would like to have. And so to do that, we would like to see this tabled, and so we can have those discussions and possibly work out how we want to progress forward going together with that, ideally on the conditional district, the zoning that we discussed. If that's not something that would work to the town's approval, obviously you have the ability to bring this back up and do this without our cooperation. So again, we request that the board stop this downzoning as provided in the town's UDO, section 155.401.4E. In order not to repeat the information contained in our client's letter dated May 7th, I'm going to incorporate that by reference as part of my presentation to you tonight. As said in our letter, we view this as a downzoning of our client's property, and our client objects to it. Our client, Strong Haven, operates in 2 different locations in the town. One location is at 11135 Monroe Road, and then also at the subject property. According to the Mecklenburg County tax records, the property on Monroe Road has a tax value of $1.1 million, and the subject property has a tax value of $2.1 million. Obviously, a combined tax value of our client's property in the town of $3.2 million. And last year alone, our client paid the town of Matthews over $38,000 in taxes. Our client's annual payroll, including benefits at these properties, is approximately $8.8 million, and members of our client's salaries and hourly employees working in Matthews numbers about 100 employees. Our client has owned and operated a substantial warehouse and office on the subject property since 1995. The county tax records indicate that the buildings on our client's property were constructed in the 1960s and then some later in 1982. Clearly, these buildings are not residential by design and use. It seems reasonable to conclude that the property has been used for light industrial uses for over 50 years and that this use continues today. Our client has made investments in this property and continues to improve and to update, and is willing to continue to improve and update in discussion with the town, as was discussed tonight. As we indicated in our letter to the Board of Commissioners, we are a little confused by the red circling of our client's property in what we view as a discriminatory fashion to destroy the value of our client's property without support in town policies. And allow me to expand on that a little bit. In reviewing the town's policies, including the town's land use plan, we find no policy supporting the downzoning of the properties generally, nor a policy supporting for downzoning particular properties, and no articulated standard for selecting individual properties such as our own for downzoning. The planning staff reports states that the former planning director prepared a list of parcels, quote, that may not be appropriate from either a current or future land use perspective, close quote. We view this statement as very vague, uncertain, and subjective, such to be no standard at all. The planning staff report states that the staff presented a pared down list of parcels, close quote, and apparently received a directive from the board to move forward with the downzoning of the list of properties. Therefore, there appeared to be no standard whatsoever including our client's property on the pared down list, at least from what we could see. If the planning department is asserting that our client's current use of the property is not appropriate from either a current or future land use perspective, we disagree, and we find no evidence for such an assertion in the town policies. The town's land use plan does not designate any specific future use of the subject property, and specifically states, quote, the town acknowledges and supports a shift toward growth of light industrial uses in its jurisdiction, close quote. And one of its action items is to, quote, encourage the growth of light industrial land uses and flex office spaces, close quote. And that's on pages 34 and 35. We view this downzoning as a violation of that action item. Second, the land use plan specifically states, quote, between the I-485 interchange area and downtown, adjacent land should remain its current, mostly residential, supporting and maintaining the existing land use. And that's from the land use plan, page 96. This downzoning would undermine the current use of our client's property, rendering it as non-conforming and discouraging the current use and our client's ongoing investment in the property, which would directly cut against what a lot of you have said tonight that are concerns of yours. As to future use, the land use plan states, quote, higher density alternative housing styles, close quote, are desired, and only retail is seemingly discouraged as a future use due to reducing competition and not due to land use incompatibility. That again is from the land use plan, page 96. As we read it, nothing in the land use plan's discussion of future use of the property in the vicinity of our client's property supports a downzoning away from our industrial or light industrial use. Interestingly, the district designated to be the new downzone district of our client's property is low-density residential. We further find no support in town policies for selection of this district as the new downzone district for our client's property. First, higher density alternative housing styles appear to be the preferred future use, and the zoning district selected was of low-density residential. We are unaware of any objective reason in the town's policies for our client's property to be rezoned to lower density residential. Second, given the size, shape, and configuration of the subject property, we view buffering, setbacks, and other development standards that would be imposed by this town would render the subject property very unattractive for redevelopment as low-density residential and use and reuse of the and that reuse of the existing buildings would be virtually impossible. Finally, as the town knows, the property is most likely impaired from an environmental standpoint and most likely unsuitable for certain types of residential use. Again, these are all issues that we would like to discuss with the town, in the discussion of the CD plan. We view proposing a low-density residential district as being unsupported by town policies and seeming to have been selected by the town to maximize the damage downzoning inflicts on the value of the property. In short, the downzoning district selected by the town in violation of its own policies, in our opinion, would constitute a taking of our client's property without just compensation. We regret having to put these facts on the record. We're trying to obviously put things on the record as might be necessary. We would like them to not have to be necessary and engage in a discussion with the town. Please treat this as our client's continuing request for the board to withdraw this downzoning for the time being so that we may enter into discussion. But until it is withdrawn, our client must reserve all rights, remedies, and claims arising out of or related to this downzoning or any other town action. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in support or opposition to the motion 2019-2? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Camp, do you have any further comments? I would like to ask a question regarding the property on Matthews Mint Hill Road, the Brigman property, or excuse me, on Brigman Road. The letter that was provided by Mr. Henderson, does that preclude, or at least with what he is pointing towards, does that preclude an extended stay hotel on that property?
So the, excuse me, the process Mr. Henderson references early designation, I would sort of describe that as rezoning light. It's still a rezoning process. It does not have the level of detail as a typical rezoning, so you may or may not have site plans or architectural drawings. So it does require a rezoning application in the entire process. Lodging is an allowed use in the E&T district. However, through the conditional zoning process, you can limit uses.
Okay. So if this were to move forward to an R15, then there's nothing that prevents the owner from coming back to the board and applying for a rezoning of that property.
Yeah, an application could come in at any time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Attorney.
That's correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This will go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their May.
I think it's the 21st, but I don't know what the continues. Correct. They changed it.
They changed it because of Memorial Day. Yeah. So we'll go to the Planning and Zoning Board May 21st. Okay. And then come back to the board for consideration in June on the 10th. Okay.
Motion to reconvene a regular meeting?
Motion made and seconded to reconvene the regular meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are back into regular meeting. Item number 11 is, well, we've recognized the Planning and Zoning Board, so we'll move on to 11B, receive report from the Planning and Zoning Board. David?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I have the Planning Board report from our meeting on April 23rd. There's 3 items for Town Board action. Number 1 is zoning application 2019-694, 1625 Windsor Square Drive, Discount Tire Store, B1 CD to BHCD. Our Planning Board voted unanimously to recommend a conditional approval of zoning application 2019-694. The board asks that the applicant work with the Board of Commissioners for the approval of elevations and site plan. Members found it consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan and reasonable as it allowed a retail use to replace a former restaurant location on US 74. Item 2 is zoning application 2019-695. Text amendment, Viking Partners request to eliminate interior side yard requirement in the B1 SCD district. Our board voted unanimously to recommend approval. Our members found it consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan and that it encourages a mix of land use in appropriate and well-planned locations. The text amendment was reasonable as it would allow shopping centers to properly subdivide space for their tenants who wish to own land and the buildings. Item 3 is zoning application 2019-696. Text amendment, John Kelly, request to modify use table listings for recreational use. Our board voted 6-1 to recommend approval, finding it consistent with Matthews Land Use Plan and reasonable that it allow indoor athletic or sports fields in districts that already allow the use outdoors. And last item was for information. Our board voted unanimously to agree to reschedule our May 28th meeting to May 21st. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, David. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 11C, number 1, we move to 14C, so we'll take that up later in the meeting. 11C2, zoning application 2019-694. The applicant has asked for a deferral of a decision on this until the June 10th, 2019 meeting. Mr. Miller?
I'll make a motion to defer the decision on the rezoning application 2019-694 to June 10th meeting.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, 11C3, zoning application 2019-695, Viking Partners text amendment. Do we have a motion? Chris, yeah.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that the Board of Commissioners adopt the approval of zoning application 2019-695 because it's reasonable and consistent with the Town of Matthews Land Use Plan in that it encourages a mix of land uses in appropriate and well-planned locations, helping Matthews remain a healthy and attractive community. It's reasonable because the text amendment will allow shopping centers to properly subdivide building space for their tenants who wish to own their building and land.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on application 2019-695. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, 11C4, zoning application 2019-696, J. Kelly text amendment. Do we have a motion on that zoning application? Mr. Igdon.
Make a motion that we approve application 2019-696 because it's consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan and that it encourages a mix of land uses in appropriate and well-planned location. It helps Matthews remain a healthy and attractive community, and it would allow for existing buildings to be used for athletic activities where outdoor activities are already allowed. And it's reasonable because the text amendment will allow indoor athletic or sports fields in districts that already allowed those uses outdoors.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
Okay, motion been made and seconded to approve the zoning application. Any discussion? Mr. Urban.
Just a follow-up. In reading the planning board report, and this is for Jay, Carrie's not here tonight. It was an interesting sidebar, an issue brought up, but my suspicion is because we set height limitations in the zoning ordinance that this quote-unquote bubble he had referred to, or building up beyond the roof height, that really isn't a possibility. He was grasping at a sort of unintended consequence, and I'm just thinking that we regulate height so predominantly in the zoning ordinance that there isn't a possibility of that. Is that an accurate statement? That's correct. Thank you.
Good point.
Okay, any additional discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, 12, reports from advisory committees. The first is 12A, Appearance and Tree Board. And the chair, Debbie Foster, has been patiently sitting here through all of this. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Mayor Bailey asked a group of people to get together and do some brainstorming to see how we could spruce up the town for the Republican National Convention and put its best foot forward on that and potentially use tourism dollars for that. So present at the meeting were Mayor Bailey, Jay Camp, Ralph Ramseur, C.J. O'Neill, Hazen Blodgett, and myself. And these are a partial list of the ideas that we came up with, additional public art in the town of Matthews, entrances, right-of-ways in the downtown area to see what we could do to kind of supersize the visual impact there, a wildflower project with DOT participating in that, new light poles in particular areas, new signs, perhaps landscaping the town green, since it's been quite a few years apparently since that was done. And then my particular expertise is planting. So if you're looking at plantings, which we are thinking is one of the biggest things we need to do with this, we need to be looking at actually a whole year out. So you can't just wait until next year and start planting things. You need to be doing it now. So some of the things that are on the timeline, which is tight, but it is doable. Hiring a landscape designer, and I actually have someone I would like for at least to look into, with an emphasis on native plants, because that fits our mission statement with the community certified wildlife habitat for the town of Matthews and Tree City USA and Bee City USA. And using smart designs that don't just spruce it up for a short time, but give us a bang for our buck, and we get to see these plants bloom year after year after year. I call it a four-season thing, because the National Convention is in fall. So we're going to have to look at plants that haven't just bloomed in the spring and early summer, but that are blooming into the late summer and into the fall, so that we still have something very attractive when people come into town. We'll need to identify the sites that we're going to do something on. We'll have to approve the designs, and then the installation would actually be in fall of this year. So you can see it's a really tight timeline. At the next meeting, we should have some priorities set, so we will have our sites identified and particular locations and how we're going to reach our goals. But my goal tonight was just to give you a heads up that this is coming, because I know it's really fast, and you may have some questions that you want us to look into, or just some questions about what on earth is she talking about. So I wanted to give you a chance to throw some things at me so we can do some research and get back with you at the next meeting.
John?
Any idea of a budget for this?
Well, if we're using the tourism dollars, you know, that
unlimited.
Leaves it wide open. Partly what we need to do is identify those sites, because that's going to drive the budget. I mean, we can't just say, you know, we're going to hit every corner in Matthews. That's not logical. So we'll have to identify the sites.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. I have one idea that I've mentioned to one of the people at this dais so far. What we commonly refer to as, I guess, the wagon wheel, where Weddington and Pleasant Plains roads meet. Mm-hmm. If you're coming from down Weddington Road from, say, the Publix and YMCA, and you come to the stoplight at Pleasant Plains and Trade Street accordingly. There's a wall straight ahead under the stoplight and a lot of wires, etc. And that retaining wall is in many areas very steep. I would like to suggest that that be treated as perhaps a gateway, and we look at maybe retaining wall blocks in that area, maybe terraced into a planting area, or you know, a Matthews logo built into the retaining wall blocks. It'd be easy to backfill, you know, and just follow the curve of the sidewalk. So, just a suggestion.
It's a good one. Is that part of the development for the greenway going under the bridge there?
No, the greenway is further towards Mara Ball Fields. It's going under the Trade Street culvert where they're widening it for the last couple years. And then it's gonna curve under and to the left and come up the hill across the street from that area.
Okay.
So, you know, maybe there's something in conjunction, but it's going to come up the hill to the sidewalk on the left side if you're at that intersection. I'm talking about straight ahead. There's an ugly wall where everybody puts their campaign signs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Urban.
Two items. One goes to Hazen. Can we get back on any loose ends on the wayfinding? Do we have gateway signs or something? Have we accomplished everything we need to, or are there still openings available?
So I'll have to check and see what hasn't been built and what monies do we have. Just like Commissioner Miller's example, which is kind of something new to the fold, but it is. I mean, if folks have been there, they can understand where he's talking about. I think the key probably is finding somebody to help us design work. I'm almost sure staff doesn't have time. I don't know if they got the expertise or not. So it seems to me we gotta find somebody to help us identify the sites, come back to you guys, make sure we're all marching in the same direction, then get those things designed, and then get an estimated cost. And it could be significant. There is, as of our last audit, there's $1,250,000 in the fund balance for tourism. Now there's Greenway, there's a lot of things that are kind of competing for that, but that is what we have as of June 30th, 2018.
So second point was, I'm really talking about the Matthews entry signs, that stuff. Second point was, obviously, we had conversations earlier tonight about the most iconic plantings that take place in downtown are the 100 block planters and hanging baskets. Obviously, you're talking about the fall. So we would have to sort of, I'd like to see that program expanded for the RNC, but then you have to sort of plan, how do you get through the summer and into the fall with those planters and hanging baskets? I think that's preeminent of all things, because that's what everybody walks away with when they come downtown.
I agree. And it's easy to do. You just kind of layer the plantings in there. So you've got some things that bloom early and some things that bloom in the middle of the summer and some things that bloom later. So examples of plants that would bloom into the fall would be asters, and we have native asters in this area that are very attractive, lots of different colors, and also some of the rudbeckias or black-eyed Susans are very, very bright and colorful. We did specifically ask Ralph Remser if he had any wish to take on designing this particular project, and he said no, he simply doesn't have the staff available to do this. So he would welcome looking outside for some help.
Mr. Higdon?
This is directed to the mayor or to Hazen. Are we actively engaging with RNC folks to say if there's going to be something happening here? Because I'd hate to get all dressed up and nobody come to our party, you know?
Yes, the RNC committee is in process, and we're attempting to get into their advertising brochures and whatnot. We did talk about potentially doing something with the state of the town video, maybe doing a much shorter clip on the town. Okay. And then something that I want to talk to them face-to-face about is one of the morning shows coming out to the green and trying to do that one day while the convention's going on. And so hopefully that can be a national morning show so that we get some national publicity.
I will add too, the last time that we tried to do something with a uniform appearance for each of the entries into town, I think we didn't take into account that those areas all get different light and moisture and have different types of soil in them. So this time we would go at it from the same perspective, but it won't be a cookie cutter, and it shouldn't be a cookie cutter, because what plant does well here will not necessarily do well there. But we can have a color theme or something like that so that we still have a more uniform look, but it's just not a cookie cutter approach.
One thing I did want to mention, Mr. Higgin, you asked about the money. I think a lot of these things are items that we've talked about. The public's made comments about, like the hanging baskets, things that we want to do. So it's an opportunity to do that. But as the manager said, the plan will come back to us with the dollars associated with it. And
I think it'd be money well spent.
Yeah, I think it would too. But we got to make sure that we're not, spending money that we've looked at for greenways or other things. So we've got to balance it.
Especially if these things will last beyond the convention and we can enjoy them for years to come, it would be.
Right, yeah, if these were annuals, which don't come back year after year, this would not be a good use of funds, but perennials, you get your money's worth from.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you.
Let's see, we've got minutes from the Environmental Advisory Committee, Cultural Diversity Committee, and the Transportation Advisory Committee, and I don't see any of those folks here, so we have those in our package. Next item, item 13, consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda items 13A through J7.
Motion be made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, 14A, consider contract for stormwater projects. CJ?
Mayor, Board, Susan's outlined in her memo, and I'm just going to go over it briefly. I hope you've had time to look through it. Last year we had two major storms, hurricanes that came through this area. Well, not hurricanes, but that really put a big dent in the stormwater projects. We had a lot of rain that came through and brought up some weaknesses in the system. We went from, I think it was 24 project backlog to 40 projects in that 2-month time span. So we are now looking at about a 2-year wait for the projects at the bottom of that. What staff has come back with is a list of projects that we'd like to pursue and a budget for those, $275,000. That is a not to exceed number. We'd use that. We have unit rates from a contractor. We went out to bid. Unfortunately, with the state of things, we're only able to get one contractor who is interested in doing the work. We have worked with them before. They do good work, and we're hoping to move forward with them to try to get ahead of some of these projects. So what we're asking for is a not to exceed budget of $275,000, and we'll use them project by project to and see how far that money goes. We think it should get probably the 5 or 6 of the hardest projects, the most time consuming projects, and allow us to get back on track.
Mr. Higgin.
So CJ, you have kind of like a menu of the cost for these items?
We do.
And the total is $389,000, so you're just going to select and pick $275,000 worth? Is that
correct? We didn't feel comfortable spending that much money on all the projects listed.
Yeah, some of them in particular look excessive, like traffic control for $30,000.
So, and I'm sorry that I did not take a look at that, but that's for all of the projects put together. It's broken down per project. So when you have 10 projects, you break it down, it's much less than that.
And the daily operations line item is $53,786.25. That's just for management of all these projects?
Yeah, and again, that's something that was put in. This is based off the City of Charlotte's contract and how they do that. I think that is where the contractor actually puts in his profit. The rest of that, I think, is all basically his cost. But I can find that out and get back to you if you'd like.
I don't really have a problem with it. I just want to be assured that we're using the money judiciously, and I expect that you will do that. We have great confidence in our staff, so use the money well. I don't have a problem with it. We need to get caught up.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Is there, just a quick question, is there a listing of the locations of where these projects are? I guess it's maybe a long list, but it wasn't identified, you know, for swale grading or anything like that on where it is.
Right. I've got a list of the ones that we've proposed right now. Do you want me to run down them quickly?
No, maybe you could share it via email.
Sure, I can send that out.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
And CJ, for clarity, this money's coming out of the fund balance, but it's the designated portion of the fund balance, and this money can only be used on stormwater projects.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the town manager to enter into a contract with United Construction Company and appropriate funds not to exceed $275,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is item 14B, preliminary assessment resolution. CJ.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Still here.
I got Jay on my mind.
That's all right. Jay, you want to? We've been through this process before. Unfortunately, this kind of follows the same path as the last one. We had a developer who started development on a project. This one is 16 lots. Was not able to complete the project, so the county withheld their bond, which was $39,000 and change in cash. And unfortunately, that is not enough to do the repairs needed to bring those streets and associated infrastructure up to our standards for us to bring them over for maintenance. So the residents there, I think 11 of the 16, the owners of the 11 owners of the 16 lots petitioned the town to undergo a special assessment and be assessed for the additional cost to bring the project, to bring the roads and associated infrastructure to our standards. One thing they did put in there, and I'm sorry, and I did put in the NCGS chapter 168, Article 10, which gives the procedure. So if you want to look through there, that's there for your reference. They did put in there that the signatures were only valid if the cost came in within 10% or less than 10% above the estimate that I had done. I don't think that's something they can really do. However, my suggestion moving forward is we do have a bid out for reclamation that includes these roads in here. Once we get that back, we will have hard numbers, and if it comes in above that, then the board can decide not to go forward with that if they so choose.
Yeah, the next one will be an order to do it, but you will have we'll have all the numbers together before you actually order to move forward.
The assessment, correct. This is just the preliminary assessment, which is setting the stage and setting the public hearing for it. And
Mr. Higdon?
Is the interest rate of 5% what we have traditionally charged? And is the town making any money on this transaction?
So this is exactly the same format that we used for the last subdivision that came through the process. 5%, as far as we may make a little bit or we may lose a little bit, I think it's pretty much a wash over that time period.
I just think it's a very unfortunate circumstance, and that the town should limit the exposure to the homeowners as much as possible. Of course, we don't want to lose money, but I don't think we should profit on it either.
Mr. Urban?
So CJ, you're telling me you're already working on a proactive stance, because it sounds like it's already happened to us twice, and it's probably happened to us even more so in previous years. So tell me what it is we can do about sort of preempting this a little bit. I mean, is there a method when someone defaults on this, that developer goes on our you-know-what list and never can work in the town again? And are we also able to increase our bonding limits? So, because it looks like it's almost half of where we need to be.
So I think you are all aware of the legislature and what they've enacted that really hamstrings our ability to do a lot of those things. If the contractor changes names, then we don't have the ability to do that. The contractor right now can lower their bond anytime they make a change to it, and we can only bond what it would cost the remainder for them to finish their subdivision. So if they do something and it fails, we can't bond for that additional amount. We're not allowed to. We've tried to be proactive. We have changed our standards as far as, rather than what we had done up to this point, is allowing them to put in, I guess, really an insufficient base and asphalt until the project's completed, and then put in that final inch. We're requiring them to put all of that in up front. It's not going to look as pretty in the end, but it helps shield us from some of these things happening, and the construction equipment going across it, tearing it up, and then not being able to recoup those costs.
I think we talked about that before, is playing with the technical specifications. Who do we need to talk to? Because in reality, if a citizen is on the hook to picking up this, they are taxpayers to the folks in Raleigh. And this guy comes, does his deal, leaves town, and we're on the hook for paying for road repair.
We're really not on the hook. It's the homeowners who are on the hook. The town, there's no requirement that the town accept this.
Except the road itself, yes.
Right, the roads. But because of the citizens that live there are agreeable to an assessment based on a per lot assessment, and I think it's anticipated to be somewhere around $2,200 per lot. Then they finance it. What makes this affordable is the fact of the bond of about almost $40,000 that reduces the cost of the construction.
So as I recall, when this happened after on Oscar Drive, we went in and raised our bonding limits to shield ourselves from this. X amount of years ago, the General Assembly came in and tightened those bond limits down, and some of this is a little bit of you're projecting and estimating, and you can get behind the 8 ball. Not us, but the property owners. To me, it's an example simply where the General Assembly is listening to special interests and not looking out for the interests of the
John Q. Public.
That's exactly right. That's who gets. And you know, Mr. Buckley's correct. We're not responsible. Guess what? People feel like they can reach out and grab us and come fuss at us. And in some ways, we've been lucky with both these instances that these community leaders understand it's not the town's fault, so they take responsibility themselves. Hopefully, it'll all work out at the end. But
well, it would be nice if we were supportive of something and at least went to Raleigh and expressed our displeasure with it, so the citizens know that it's not on us and that we're making an effort, or at least sending something up there telling them this, because $2,200 may not be a lot for anybody up on this dais, but it may be somebody else as well. So it's just not right.
Just point of clarification.
Mr. Melton.
And CJ, forgive me for asking you to repeat yourself, but it's my understanding that the homeowners affected by this petition for us to move forward with this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So they're asking us asking us for help.
That's correct.
Thank you.
They're willing to finance to get the street system up to our standards.
Thank you.
Now, they can pay the entire amount up front and avoid interest. But those who, not many of us have $2,200 to shell out. You can put it on an installment basis, and and that has a 5% interest per year. You can pay that off early.
Thank you.
Right? Any other comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the preliminary assessment resolution and set a public hearing date for June 10th, 2019.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve or adopt the attached preliminary assessment resolution. And we're setting the public hearing for June 10th. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the next item is item 14C, and this is originally 11C1 zoning application 2018-691, Boyd Funderburk Drive. Do we have anyone here from the applicant? So I guess the discussions that
They're still installing in the public hearing.
yeah, if you could say your name and address.
Brian Miller, 1927 South Tryon Street, Charlotte, North Carolina. Here on behalf of the petitioner, they're still in stallings right now. Just been texting them back and forth. They're still in public hearing.
Okay.
We can move forward to try to kind of go through any questions. The other thing that John Carmichael requested, that if it was an option to go into close the meeting and then come back afterwards. I don't know if that's something you guys would be willing to do. I'm not sure if that's even an option.
I think we just prefer to defer to June,
June 10th.
either June 10th or we could do it in 2 weeks.
Are you guys open to doing it right now? I mean, is there?
No, we
Is there any
specifically want to make sure that Stallings, I mean, they have the bulk of the
Because you guys need to
project.
hear that to approve the.
Yeah. Mr. Query.
Yes. Would it be a possibility, I mean, I know we've got some other things going and we're going into closed session, but we'll have to come back before we can adjourn. Could we leave it open till then?
I think that's what John was referring. I butchered that, but that's, I think, John seeing if that was an option.
Yeah, what's your pleasure?
If we could defer 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the difference?
Okay, do you have a motion, Mr. Urban?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. What are we at here? This is zoning application 2018-691.
Correct.
Boyd Funderburk Drive, that we defer a decision for 2 weeks. That would give us what date? Is that May
It's,
28th?
The 28th.
27th.
28th.
Because of the
Tuesday.
reschedule of our meeting.
27th is Memorial Day, so.
Yeah.
Oh.
28th.
The meeting's on Tuesday. Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mill. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So just tell John 2 weeks, we'll revisit it then.
Nothing they could do. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the mayor's report, and I just wanted to go through some things, some events we've got coming up. Tomorrow is the Chamber Golf Tournament, and I have sponsored a town team, I guess is what we call it. There is an award for last place, so we will be vying for that. So we'll see how things go. Hopefully we don't hit each other with any golf balls.
Who is the town team?
Mr. Urban, myself, Mr. Blodgett, and Mr. Alan Crosby on the Board of Adjustments plays golf. So,
Is he the ringer?
no. Mr. Urban's the ringer. Okay, on Wednesday, just want to remind you that we got the spring employee luncheon, and it's at the Sportsplex. And then the dinner will be at Cruise Recreation Center. And I would ask that if you can go to the dinner, that would be great for those